My wife never had her own opinion. She copied their advice, their judgments, even their cruel whispers about me. They told her I wasn't good enough, that she could find better, and she believed them. Piece by piece, she stopped being my partner and became their puppet. I tried to fight for us, but when I finally overheard what they really thought and how much of their poison she'd swallowed, something inside me snapped. That's why I took revenge on her. How? I'll tell you now. I noticed it first in the way she dressed. It wasn't anything dramatic at the start, just a blouse I hadn't seen before, a touch of lipstick when she claimed she was just meeting the girls, or a dress that seemed more fitted than the one she wore for me. But it made me pause, made me glance twice. My wife, Anna, had always been beautiful, but she never seemed overly concerned with keeping up appearances. Now, suddenly, there was this edge, this deliberate polish, like she was preparing herself for judgment. At night, she would slide under the covers smelling faintly of new perfume, a sharper scent than her usual floral softness. She'd roll onto her side, scrolling her phone long after I turned off the light. The glow would illuminate her face, lips curved in little smiles as she texted with her friends. I'd lie there, trying not to feel excluded from some world that seemed to matter more to her than the man lying beside her. When she finally set her phone down, sometimes I'd reach for her, sliding a hand across her hip, tugging her closer. She wouldn't push me away, but she felt distracted, restless, as if her mind was still in that chat room. Some nights, though, she surprised me, climbing on top with sudden hunger, kissing me with the urgency of someone who needed to prove something to herself. The sex was different, harder, faster, almost competitive. I'd catch my breath and wonder, who exactly is she trying to convince? During the day, small comments began to slip into conversation. You should think about updating your wardrobe, she said once, studying my shirt as though it were a failed experiment. Another time, when I laughed at a stupid meme, she frowned. Your laugh, it's kind of loud, don't you think? She'd never said that before. For years, she told me she loved that I laughed easily. Now it was suddenly a flaw. I tried to brush it off, but the pattern grew. Her friends' names kept coming up. Sasha said this. Lena thinks that. Irina insists it's a trend. Their opinions slipped into her sentences until I couldn't tell where their voices ended and hers began. It was like living with an echo, my wife fading beneath layers of borrowed judgments. One evening, I came home earlier than expected. The apartment was quiet except for the sound of her voice drifting from the kitchen. I paused, setting my keys down softly, and listened. She was on speakerphone with her friends. He's comfortable, but is comfortable really enough? Sasha's sharp voice pierced through. He's not a bad guy, but you deserve better. More ambition. More style. Irina chimed in. Anna laughed lightly. I know. He's stable. But sometimes I wonder. My chest tightened. I pressed myself against the wall, unwilling to step in, terrified to hear more, but unable to walk away. They kept talking, dissecting me like I wasn't a living, breathing man, but some failed project she brought to show and tell. They said I looked unkempt, that my job was safe but uninspiring, that a woman like Anna could find someone more successful, more handsome, more everything. And then came the worst part. She's settling, one of them said, and Anna didn't argue. She didn't defend me. She didn't say a word. Later that night, when she slid into bed, she kissed me softly, almost automatically. I kissed her back, but my thoughts were spinning. I felt like an actor in a role she was no longer impressed by. I wanted to grab her, to remind her of the passion between us, the way her body melted into mine when we first married. For a moment, I did, rolling her onto her back, pinning her wrists above her head, kissing her until she gasped. She responded, wrapping her legs around me, arching against me, and for a fleeting moment I thought I'd erased the voices of her friends. Her nails dug into my shoulders, and when she whispered my name, it almost sounded like it used to. We moved together with raw need, and for those minutes I forgot everything I'd overheard. But afterward, as I lay there with her head on my chest, I felt the distance again. She was quiet, eyes half closed, as though she were somewhere else already. The intimacy had been real, but it was laced with something new. Doubt, calculation, maybe even guilt. That night, I didn't sleep much. I stared at the ceiling, listening to her breathing. My wife was still beside me, still warm, still mine, but I couldn't shake the thought that, piece by piece, I was losing her to people who weren't even in our bed. It started with small remarks, the kind you could laugh off if you were in a generous mood. You know, you really should think about getting a better haircut. Anna said one Saturday morning, running her fingers through my hair absent-mindedly. Except there was no affection in the gesture. It felt like she was examining me for defects. I raised an eyebrow. What's wrong with it? It's fine, she said, lips tightening into a smile that wasn't quite real. But Sasha says men should always keep it sharp. Makes you look more professional. Polished. I tried to joke. So, Sasha's going to start cutting my hair now? She chuckled but didn't answer. That was the beginning. Soon it wasn't just my hair. It was my clothes, my shoes, my laugh, even the way I leaned back in my chair after dinner. You slouch, she remarked one evening. It's not very confident. Another time, when I poured us glasses of wine, she commented, You know, real men usually prefer something stronger. Real men, confident, polished, professional. I recognized the pattern. Words that didn't sound like her, words that sounded borrowed. The thing was, Anna hadn't always been like this. When we first met, she loved my casual look, teased me about my messy hair, said it made me look dangerous in a boyish way. She used to laugh with me, not at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was holding me against some invisible standard set by people who didn't even share her bed. I tried to play along at first, tried to show her I was willing to adjust. I shaved more often, bought a couple of shirts that hugged my body better, even looked at new shoes. When she noticed, her eyes lit up briefly, and I felt a flicker of hope. But then she pursed her lips. It's better, she said. But you know, Sasha's boyfriend always looks like he stepped out of a magazine. I wanted to ask, and how long has Sasha's boyfriend actually stuck around? But I didn't. Instead, I poured myself another glass of wine, letting the silence stretch. That night, when she slid into bed, I thought about ignoring her, retreating into my own shell. But when she shifted against me, pressing her hips into mine, I couldn't resist. Desire wasn't gone, not yet. It was tangled with frustration, but it burned hot all the same. Her body was eager, maybe even more than usual. She kissed me hard, almost biting my lip, and guided my hand beneath her shirt. The sharp edge of her nails against my skin made my pulse quicken. I gave in, rolling her beneath me, feeling her thighs tighten around my waist. The sex was fierce, almost punishing, both of us grasping for something we couldn't name. I wanted to reclaim her, to remind her of who we were without the chorus of voices around us. She moaned, gasped, pulled me closer until her cries filled the room. For a moment, I believed we still belonged to each other. But afterward, as we lay side by side, I felt her drift. Her breathing steadied. Her body relaxed, but she was distant, eyes fixed on the ceiling as though calculating something. I turned toward her, kissed her shoulder. What are you thinking? I asked softly. She hesitated. Then, in a low voice, she said, I just wish you'd try harder. You could be so much more. The words hit harder than any argument. Try harder. As if everything I already was, every late night at work, every effort provided, every laugh, every touch, wasn't enough. I rolled onto my back, staring into the dark, the way her words pressed down heavier than her body ever could. For the first time, I wondered if love wasn't about how much you gave, but about whether the other person actually wanted it. Over the next days, her remarks grew bolder. She compared me to strangers, to husbands or friends, even to men in movies. I laughed at some of them, but deep down, each comparison chipped away at me. I began to feel as though I was standing on trial, judged not for who I was, but for who I wasn't. And the jury wasn't even her. It was a circle of women who whispered in her ear, women who seemed to delight in planting seeds of doubt. Still, every night, I tried. I kissed her, touched her, pulled her against me as if intimacy could fix what words were breaking. Sometimes she responded with hunger, sometimes with indifference. But even in her passion, there was a hollowness that scared me. One evening, I asked her, Do you ever get tired of what your friends think? Doesn't it get exhausting, living by their rules? She turned her head sharply. They only want the best for me. And what about what I want for you? Her lips curved into a small, sad smile. Maybe you just don't see me the way they do. I didn't answer. But lying awake that night, I realized she was right in a way. I didn't see her the way they did. To me, she was my wife, my partner, the woman who once laughed at my dumb jokes and kissed me in crowded streets without caring who watched. To them, she was a prize, a jewel that deserved a better setting. And I began to fear that she believed them more than she believed in us. The distance between us didn't come all at once. It seeped in slowly, like water through crack, filling the empty spaces we never thought we had. At first, it was small things. She stayed later after work because her friends needed to talk. She took calls in the bedroom with the door closed. When I asked who it was, she'd smile lightly, saying, "Just Lena, nothing important." But I could hear the muffled laughter, the sharp tones, the little pauses where I knew my name was being spoken. Our dinners together became fewer, and when we did sit across the table, she was somewhere else entirely. Her fork moved absently through her food while her phone buzzed beside her plate. I tried not to look, but it was impossible to ignore the glow of the screen, the way her lips curled into that sly smile as she typed back. One evening, I made her favorite, steak with roasted vegetables, the kind of dinner that had once earned me kisses in the kitchen and a playful tug into the bedroom before the plates were even cleared. She thanked me with a polite nod, took 2 bites, and then excused herself to take a call. I sat alone at the table, staring at her half-finished plate, feeling like a stranger in my own home. When she finally came to bed, I wanted to confront her, demand to know why her friends had more of her attention than I did. But when she slid beside me, warm and soft in her nightgown, the words dried in my throat. Instead, I pulled her close, pressing my lips to her neck. She sighed, shifting against me, and for a moment I felt hope spark again. We made love that night, but even then, I sensed the distance. Her body moved with mine, but her mind was far away, like she was trying to silence thoughts she didn't want me to hear. She clutched at me as if desperate, but when she cried out my name, I couldn't tell if it was passion or a plea for reassurance. Afterward, I lay awake, holding her as she drifted to sleep. I want to believe the closeness was real, but I couldn't escape the image of her phone lighting up on the nightstand, messages waiting from the voices that pulled her farther from me each day. The next morning, I decided to test her. Over breakfast, I suggested we plan a weekend trip, just the 2 of us. Remember when we went to that cabin by the lake? I asked, watching her reaction. We could use something like that again. Just us. She hesitated, spoon hovering above her coffee. "I'll have to see," she said finally. The girls and I were talking about a spa weekend. My jaw tightened. "You'd rather spend the weekend with them than with me?" Her eyes flicked up sharp. "Why do you always make a competition?" I wanted to shout that I wasn't the one competing, that I was already losing without even playing. But I stayed silent, chewing my toast slowly until it tasted like nothing. The days stretched into weeks. She spent more time outside the house, coming home late with excuses that sounded rehearsed. When she was home, her attention was divided, eyes on her phone, ears half listening to me. I started to wonder if I existed only in the spaces between her conversations with them. I tried to fight it in small ways. I bought her flowers one evening, a bouquet of her favorite lilies. She smiled, kissed my cheek, and set them in a vase, then immediately texted a picture to her group chat. The compliment she wanted wasn't mine. It was theirs. Another time, I suggested we try a new restaurant. She agreed, but halfway through dinner, her phone buzzed and she excused herself to take the call. I sat alone, staring at her wine glass, feeling the sting of humiliation as couples around us leaned in close, laughing, whispering, touching. It was then that I realized intimacy wasn't only about sex or kisses or shared beds. It was about presence, about choosing to be with someone fully. And Anna wasn't choosing me anymore. But still I couldn't let go. When she came home, when she slipped off her shoes and stretched her arms, I wanted her. I wanted to believe she was still mine. I'd pull her into my arms, kiss her neck, let my hands wander down her back. Sometimes she yielded. Sometimes she pushed me away with a distracted laugh. The rejection stung, but even when she gave in, the hollowness remained. One night, after another argument that fizzled into silence, she leaned against the balcony railing, phone in hand. I stood in the doorway, watching her, the city lights reflected in her eyes, making her look untouchable, almost foreign. "What are they telling you tonight?" I asked finally. She didn't turn around. "Nothing you'd understand." And just like that, the space between us grew wider than the city stretching out below. I hadn't planned on coming home early that day. A client meeting was canceled at the last minute, and for once I thought I'd surprise Anna, maybe cook dinner together, open a bottle of wine, and remind ourselves of what it felt like when the only voices in our marriage were ours. The apartment was quiet when I slipped my shoes off in the hallway. I expected the television, maybe music, but instead I heard her voice in the kitchen, low, playful, and not alone. She was on speakerphone, laughter floating in with a clink of glasses. I should have walked in and announced myself. Instead, I froze, instinct pulling me toward the half-open door. Her voice was light, but beneath it was something sharp, something that made my stomach twist. I know, Anna was saying, but sometimes I wonder if he's really the man I thought he'd be. A chorus of responses followed. 3, maybe 4 women, their tones dripping with certainty. You've outgrown him, one said. He's not ambitious enough. Another chimed in. Honestly, Anna, you're gorgeous. You could have anyone. Why settle for someone so average? Average. The word cut deeper than I wanted to admit. I pressed myself against the wall, listening as my heart pounded in my chest. Anna laughed, soft but nervous. Don't be cruel. Cruel? She didn't disagree. She didn't offend me. Sasha's voice pierced through next, sharp as glass. You deserve a man who looks like he knows what he's doing, not one who slouches around. Honestly, when was the last time he did something impressive? Irina added, Exactly. He's safe, and safe gets boring fast. The room spun around me. Safe, boring, average. Words meant to sum up my entire being. But the worst was yet to come. He's not a bad guy, one of them said, but you could do better, much better. You just have to be brave enough to admit it. There was silence on Anna's end, the kind of silence that says more than words ever could. And then, almost shyly, she murmured, Sometimes I think you're right. My knees went weak. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself, fighting the urge to storm in and demand an explanation. But I stayed hidden, listening as they dissected me like I was nothing more than a flawed purchase she'd regretted. They mocked my laugh. They joked about my clothes, my income, even the way I poured a drink. Petty, ridiculous things, but spoken with such conviction that I could hear the poison seeping into her. By the time she hung up, my heart was a knot of rage and despair. I slipped back to the door, making noise this time, pretending I'd just arrived. She greeted me with a smile, kissed my cheek, and asked about my day. I kissed her back, tasting betrayal in the softness of her lips. At dinner, I studied her as she spoke casually about work. Her eyes were bright, her gestures animated, but all I could hear were the words of her friends echoing in my skull. Average, boring, safe. When she leaned over the table and brushed her foot against my leg, heat stirred in me despite myself. I reached for her hand, squeezing it firmly, almost possessively. She met my gaze with a flicker of surprise, then smiled, slow and deliberate. Later that night, in the dim light of our bedroom, I couldn't hold back. I kissed her hard, hands roaming over her body, needing to remind both of us that I was still her husband, still the man who knew her better than anyone else. She gasped, arching beneath me, her nails digging into my skin. The sex was urgent, almost desperate. I drove into her with force that bordered on anger, as though I could erase every poisonous word with the weight of my body. She met me with equal hunger, moaning my name, biting my shoulder. For those moments, she was mine again, completely, utterly mine. But afterward, as she lay curled against me, the distance returned. Her breathing slowed. Her hand rested lightly on my chest, but I felt the hollowness between us. I wanted to ask her what she really thought of me, if she believed the things her friends said. I wanted to demand the truth, but fear held my tongue, because I already knew the answer. The next morning, I looked at her across the breakfast table. She was radiant, sipping her coffee, scrolling through messages with a faint smile. And I thought about the silence after her friends told her she could do better. Silence is its own kind of confession. It didn't take long for their voices to find their way into our home. At first, it was subtle, phrases that felt borrowed, opinions that sounded rehearsed. But soon, Anna wasn't just listening to her friends. She was speaking as them. You know, real men don't waste so much time on pointless hobbies, she said one night, her eyes on me as I tinkered with my guitar. The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they weren't hers. Anna had once begged me to play for her. She used to curl up on the couch, eyes closed, saying my music made her feel safe. Now she looked at the instrument like it was a childish distraction. Another evening, I came home from work to find her waiting in the living room. She studied me for a long moment, arms crossed. You should think about aiming higher at work. Sasha's boyfriend just got promoted. Maybe you should start showing more initiative. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. Sasha's boyfriend was a new flavor every few months. Men who flashed expensive watches and disappeared before the season changed. Yet somehow, I was being measured against them. I swallowed my anger and asked, Do you even hear yourself? That doesn't sound like you talking. Her eyes narrowed. Why do you always dismiss my opinions? Because they weren't hers anymore. But I didn't say it. I couldn't. Instead, I kissed her cheek and went to shower, letting the water wash away the weight of words that weren't even hers. But the echoes kept coming. At dinner, she remarked, "You really should do something about your posture. Confident men carry themselves differently." In bed, after sex, she whispered, "You should think about going to gym more often. Stronger arms would suit you." Each remark chipped away at me. Not because I thought she was wrong, but because I remembered the woman who used to love me exactly as I was. That woman seemed to be vanishing, replaced by a puppet with strings pulled from outside. And yet, I still wanted her. Maybe more than ever. Because every moment of intimacy felt like a chance to reclaim her, to remind her of us. One night, after another cutting remark, I kissed her so hard it silenced her mid-sentence. She gasped, surprised, but then melted into me, her hands clawing at my shirt. We tumbled onto the bed, our bodies colliding with urgency. I stripped her dress away, kissed the curve of her neck, the hollow of her collarbone, and pushed her thighs apart with a hunger I hadn't felt in months. She moaned, arching against me, and for those minutes, she wasn't theirs. She was mine entirely. The sex was fierce, almost violent with desperation. I wanted to mark her, to brand myself into her skin so no voice could erase me. She clung to me, breathless, whispering my name like a prayer. And when she came, trembling beneath me, I believed, if only for a heartbeat, that I had silenced him. But afterward, as I lay beside her, her breathing slowed and I heard it, the faint buzz of her phone on the nightstand. She reached for it almost automatically, fingers dancing across the screen, a small smile tugging at her lips. I turned away, staring into the dark. Even in our most intimate moments, they were there, waiting in the wings, ready to reclaim her attention. The next morning, she repeated a line I'd heard almost word for word the night before in that overheard call. "Sometimes I think you're just too safe, and safe can get boring." I froze, coffee mug halfway to my lips. She wasn't even hiding it anymore. I set the mug down carefully, staring at her across the table. "Do you even believe that? Or are you just quoting them?" Her eyes flickered, just for a second, then she straightened. Maybe they're just seeing things I've been afraid to admit. I wanted to argue, to scream, to shake her until she remembered who we were. But all I managed was a quiet. "And what about what we built? Does that mean nothing?" She looked down at her phone, avoiding my gaze. In that silence, I realized something that made my stomach twist. I wasn't losing to another man. I was losing to a chorus of ghosts, women who didn't share her bed, her life, her vows. And yet, somehow, they were winning. That night, I lay awake long after she drifted off. I watched her chest rise and fall, her hair spilling across the pillow, her lips parted in sleep. She was still breathtaking, still the woman I loved. But I couldn't shake the thought that when she opened her eyes, she wouldn't be mine anymore. She'd be theirs. And I didn't know how much longer I could keep fighting ghosts. I told myself I wouldn't let her slip away without a fight. If she wanted a sharper, cleaner, stronger version of me, then maybe I could give her that. Not because I believed her friends were right, but because I couldn't stand the thought of losing her to their voices. So I tried. I bought new clothes, shirts that fit tighter across my chest, trousers that looked less like comfort and more like ambition. I went to gym 3 times a week, sweating through sets I hadn't touched in years. I shaved more often, booked a haircut at a stylish salon instead of my usual barbershop. Even my boss noticed a change. He hinted at a potential promotion if I kept pushing. When I came home in a crisp new suit, Anna's eyes widened, her lips parting just slightly. For a moment, I saw the woman who used to stare at me with admiration. "You look good," she said, and something warm flickered in her tone. That night, she pulled me into bed with a hunger I hadn't felt from her in months. She kissed me hard, tugging at my tie, moaning into my mouth as she pressed against me. The way she clawed at my clothes, desperate to strip them away, made me believe that maybe this was working. The sex was hot, almost frantic. She rode me with abandon, hair falling across her face, eyes shining with something close to pride. When she gasped my name, trembling above me, I felt triumphant. Maybe this was a secret. Show her I could change, that I could be the man she thought she wanted. But the victory was short-lived. The next morning, as she scrolled her phone over coffee, she said casually, "It's a start, but you should think about doing more with your career. Sasha says men really need to prove themselves if they want to stand out." The warmth drained out of me. I had broken my back trying to prove myself, and still, it wasn't enough. Over the following weeks, I kept at it. I worked later, volunteered for projects, ran until my lungs burned. I wanted her to look at me and see her husband again, not the average, safe man her friends ridiculed. And sometimes it seemed to work. She'd slip her hand into mine at a restaurant, lean close at parties, whisper things in my ear that sent heat rushing through my body. In those moments, I felt like I had her back. But other times, the cracks widened. She'd compare me, subtly, carelessly, to someone else. Lena's husband just bought her a new car. Irina's boyfriend always takes her somewhere exciting. You should think about being more spontaneous. Every word felt like another weight pressing down on me, turning every effort into proof that I was still lacking. One evening, after another exhausting day, I surprised her with a weekend trip. A cabin by the lake, just like the one we'd loved years ago. She smiled when I told her, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That's sweet," she said, "but the girls and I were planning a spa weekend." I forced a smile. "So now I'm competing with them?" She frowned. "Why do you always make it sound like a competition? They're just my friends." Friends. Friends who told her I wasn't good enough. Friends whose voices echoed in her every complaint. That night, when we made love, it was different. I tried to pour every ounce of desire, every ounce of desperation, into my touch. I kissed her hard, whispered against her ear, drove myself into her with all the strength I'd gained. She gasped, clung to me, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I'd won. But afterward, as she lay sprawled across the sheets, she picked up her phone and typed a message, smiling faintly at the response. I stared at the ceiling, my chest heaving, and realized I wasn't just fighting for my marriage. I was fighting for her attention against a crowd of invisible rivals. And worse, I was starting to lose myself in the process. I dreaded the invitation from the start. Anna insisted we join her friend for drinks at a trendy rooftop bar downtown. I wanted to refuse, to tell her I had no interest in sitting across from women who thought I wasn't worthy of my own wife. But refusing would only prove them right, that I was dull, antisocial, incapable of keeping up. So I agreed, putting on my best shirt, the one she'd picked out during one of her makeover suggestions. As I adjusted my cuffs in the mirror, she slipped her arms around me from behind, kissing the back of my neck. "You look good," she murmured. The warmth of her breath against my skin stirred something in me, and for a moment, I wanted to forget all of it. I turned, kissing her deeply, letting my hand slide down her hips. She gasped, responded with the same hunger I felt. For a second, I considered pulling her back into the bedroom, tearing off her dress, and proving that we didn't need anyone else's approval. But she pulled away, lips curved in a teasing smile. "Later." "We can't be late." "Later." The word echoed as we stepped into the night. The rooftop bar was buzzing, full of polished laughter and clinking glasses. Her friends were already there, waving us over. Sasha, Irina, Lena, all perfectly dressed, their eyes sharp and assessing. I felt like a specimen under a microscope. At first, things were polite. We ordered drinks, traded small talk. But soon, the conversation turned, as it always seemed to, toward comparison. "Did you hear about Irina's promotion?" Sasha beamed. "Her boss said she's indispensable. She and Oleg are planning a trip to Greece to celebrate." "That's wonderful," Anna said, smiling brightly. "And what about you two?" Lena asked, her gaze sliding toward me. "Any big plans?" I opened my mouth, but Anna spoke first. "He's been working hard, but, well, nothing concrete yet." The way she said it, light, casual, felt like a dagger cloaked in silk. My throat tightened. Sasha leaned in, smirking. "You know, Anna deserves someone who can really spoil her. A woman like her shouldn't have to wait forever." The table erupted in laughter, light but cutting. Anna chuckled along, sipping her wine. My pulse pounded in my ears. I forced a smile, tried to laugh it off, but inside I was burning. She hadn't offended me. Not once. Later, when the conversation shifted, Irina wrinkled her nose at me. "You've got a little stain on your shirt. Didn't notice before." I glanced down, barely a drop of sauce from dinner. I reached for a napkin, but the laughter came again, sharper this time. "Honestly, Anna," Sasha teased, "how do you put up with him?" Anna laughed, shaking her head. "Don't start." But she was smiling at the joke, at me. I wanted to walk out, to leave them all behind. But I stayed, trapped by my own pride. I drained my glass, pretending the alcohol could wash away the humiliation. When we finally left, the silence between us was thick. I wanted to explode, to demand why she hadn't offended me. But then she slipped her arm through mine, leaning close. "They were just teasing," she said softly. "Teasing," I muttered. "You laughed." She sighed. "Don't take it so seriously. They don't mean anything by it." But they did. And worse, she let them. When we got home, I headed for the balcony, desperate for air. She followed, her hands sliding across my back. "Don't be angry," she whispered, pressing her lips to my neck. Anger and desire tangled inside me, impossible to separate. I turned, kissing her hard, almost rough, needing to reclaim her from their voices. She gasped, yielding, and soon we were stumbling toward the bedroom, tearing at each other's clothes. The sex was wild, charged with humiliation and fury. I thrust into her with a desperation that bordered on rage, and she met me with equal fervor, moaning my name, clawing at my back until her nails left red trails across my skin. When she came, crying out, it was like she was trying to drown the night's laughter with her own sounds. And when I finished, collapsing against her, I wondered if she needed me, or just the proof that I could still make her feel something no one else could. Afterward, as she slept, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My body still hummed from the intensity, but inside, I was hollow, because passion couldn't erase the truth. She hadn't stood by me, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't silence the memory of her laughing at their jokes. The silence after the rooftop night lasted for days. We still spoke, of course, about groceries, bills, little errands, but not about the laughter, not about the sting that still burned in my chest. It was like we were circling each other, waiting for someone to strike the first blow. The moment came on a Thursday evening. I came home later than usual, worn out from pushing through yet another long day at work. I thought maybe she'd ask how it went, maybe show some trace of the woman who used to greet me with kisses at the door. Instead, she glanced up from her phone and said, "You should try getting home earlier. Real men know how to balance work and family." Real men. Again, the word snapped something inside me. I dropped my bag onto the floor, harder than I intended. "Is that you talking, or Sasha, or Lena, or whoever else decides what kind of husband I should be?" Her eyes narrowed. "Don't start." "I'm not starting," I said, my voice sharper than I meant. "I'm finishing. Do you even hear yourself anymore? You sound like them. Every word out of your mouth. It isn't you. It's their opinion spilling out of you like you're just a messenger." She stood, crossing her arms. "They just want the best for me. Why does that scare you so much?" "Because I married you," I snapped. "Not them. I didn't vow to spend my life with a panel of critics. I vowed to spend it with my wife." Her face hardened. "Maybe you don't want to admit they're right. You're not ambitious enough. You're comfortable, but is that all you want to be? Comfortable?" I felt the heat rise in my chest. "So what? You want some flashy guy with money falling out of his pockets? Someone who'll pose for pictures but won't stick around? That's what your friends have, isn't it? Temporary men who vanish when the novelty wears off." Her eyes flashed. "At least those men try. At least they make the effort to look like they give a damn." The words hit like a slap. I took a step closer, jaw clenched. "And what about me? All the late nights, the new clothes, the gym, the dinners, the trips I planned. Was that nothing? Was that not enough effort for you?" For a moment, her mouth trembled, but then she steadied herself. "You only did those things after I pushed you. If it were up to you, you'd still be the same." The room vibrated with tension, the air thick with everything we hadn't said. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to walk out and never come back. But then her eyes softened just slightly, and the anger twisted into something darker, desire, hot and heavy, tangled with rage. I crossed the distance in 2 strides, grabbing her waist, crushing my lips against hers. She resisted for a heartbeat, then melted, kissing me back with equal fury. Our hands clawed at each other, pulling, tearing, desperate to consume the fire burning between us. We stumbled into the bedroom, clothes scattering across the floor. She shoved me back onto bed, straddling me, biting my lip until it bled. I gripped her hips hard, thrusting up into her, the line between love and war blurring with every movement. The sex was brutal, raw, every thrust a battle, every kiss a clash. She moaned my name like a curse, dug her nails into my chest, gasped as if every ounce of breath was a challenge. When she came, shuddering above me, it felt less like surrender and more like defiance. I followed her over the edge, my body collapsing beneath hers, both of us panting, soaked in sweat. For a moment, there was silence, the kind that follows a storm. But then she slid off me, lying on her back, staring at the ceiling. "We can't keep doing this," she whispered. I turned to her, chest still heaving. "Doing what?" "This." Her voice cracked slightly. "Fighting. Pretending sex fixes it. Pretending we're okay." The admission cut deeper than all the insults, because she was right. We weren't okay. And no matter how hard I tried, no matter how much fire we poured into the bedroom, it couldn't cover the cracks spreading between us. I reached for her hand, but she pulled it back, resting it on her stomach. The space between us in that bed felt wider than ever. For the first time, I wondered if this fight wasn't just another argument, if maybe it was the beginning of the end. The house felt like a pause movie the morning it happened. Colors too still, sound turned down just enough to make you hear your own heartbeat. I woke before Anna and watched sunlight crawl across the floorboards. For a moment, I let myself believe that if I made coffee just right, if I kissed her shoulder in that soft place she likes, the day could reset us. I ground the beans slower than usual, listening to the hush of the grinder, the quiet click of the kettle. When she wandered in, hair tied up, robe loose, she looked like the woman I married, soft-eyed, a little sleepy, the kind of beautiful that doesn't know it's beautiful. I kissed her temple. She accepted the kiss, but her mouth stayed still. "Thanks," she said, wrapping her hands around the mug. "Smells good." We stood by the counter, steam rising between us like a veil. I want to keep it small, but not talk about the weather, about a grocery list, about anything that didn't touch the bruise we both kept poking. But the silence pressed, and I heard my voice before I decided to use it. "Do you ever miss us?" Her eyes flicked to mine, then away. I don't know what that means anymore. I laughed softly, not because it was funny, but because I didn't want to fall apart. It means the people who couldn't keep their hands off each other in grocery store aisles. The ones who made love after burning dinner. The idiots who believed we were enough. Something in her expression tightened. We were enough. Once. The word lodged in my chest. Were. I set my mug down to keep from squeezing it to shards. "Tell me the truth, Anna. Not their truth. Yours." She traced a finger over a ring of condensation on the counter, as if sketching a door she could step through. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady in the way a blade can be steady. "I think I could do better." There it was. No drama. No cruelty. Just a sentence that unstitched the room. I stared at her, and I swear I felt the floor tilt. Better how? Someone more ambitious. More polished. A man who doesn't need pushing, who just arrives as the version I want. She swallowed. I'm tired of being the only one growing. I wanted to tell her she wasn't the only one, that I bled for every incremental change, that my body still ached from trying to become the silhouette her friends drew on napkins. But I could see in her face that evidence wouldn't matter. This wasn't a trial. It was a verdict. "So this is what Sasha and the rest have taught you," I said, the bitterness slipping out. Her jaw tightened. "Stop pretending this is just about them. They didn't make me feel what I feel. They just gave me words for it." I stepped closer, careful, as if approaching an animal that might spook. "And what do you feel right now?" She looked up. Finally, properly looked, and for a heartbeat I saw grief. "I feel like I'm betraying the person who held my hand when I didn't know who I was yet." Her lip trembled. "But I also feel like if I stay, I'll turn to someone I don't recognize." The kettle clicked again, uselessly. I turned it off. "And what about me? The man who cooked for you when you were too tired to stand? The man you dragged into closets at parties because you couldn't wait?" I tried to smile. "Didn't he arrive?" Her breath hitched. The robe had fallen a little at the throat, and there was a mark from last week's hungry night. My mark, fading. The sight lit a defiant spark in me. I reached out, fingertips brushing her collarbone. "We're still here," I whispered. "Whatever else is broken, this isn't." Her body leaned toward mine, instinct as old as us. I felt the pull, the memory of how easily we fit. I could have stepped into her, kissed her slow, led her to the bedroom, and pretended the world paused again. For a second, she almost let me, eyes closing, breath softening. Then she pulled back. "Don't," she said. It wasn't harsh, but it carried the weight of a door closing. "We can't hide in sex and call it healing." "Sex is not hiding," I said, softer than I felt. "It's the one place we tell the truth." "Not anymore." She hugged herself. Now it feels like proof you used to argue were fine. I couldn't argue. We had used our bodies as a ceasefire too many times to count. I found myself nodding, though the gesture felt like surrendering a country. So what do you want? I asked. Say it clean. She stared at the window, where light drew careful lines on the glass. I want to see if I can be happier than this. She turned back, eyes wet but unblinking. And I don't think I can do that with you. Something in me collapsed without making a sound. A quiet implosion. I thought of the cabin by the lake, the cheap bottle of wine we drank straight from the neck, the way she laughed when I carried her over the threshold, even though it wasn't our wedding night. I thought of her voice in the dark, telling me I was her home. I won't beg, I said, and it surprised us both. My voice was calm, almost gentle. I love you. I want you. I've tried. But I won't beg you to unhear the people who don't sleep in our bed. She came around the counter, close enough that I could smell her skin. Soap and something citrus. She lifted her hand to my face, thumb stroking my cheekbone. You're a good man, she whispered. That's the worst part. I caught her wrist, kissed the inside where the pulse jumped. Desire flashed, reflexive, impossible to kill. For one reckless second, we hovered on the edge. Then I let her go. I'll pack some things, I said. Give you space to chase whatever better looks like. Her breath shuddered. I didn't ask you to leave. You didn't have to. I managed a smile that felt like glass. You already left. I went to the bedroom and pulled a bag from the closet. The ritual steadied me. Shirt, jeans, the sweater she once stole and never returned. Socks. My fingers found a small box of mementos in a drawer. Ticket stubs, a Polaroid where I'm kissing her nose. I took nothing from it. Some altars deserve to stay where they are. At the door I turned. She stood in the kitchen, small and blazing, both things at once. For a moment, I wanted to throw everything down and take her on the floor, to brand the morning with proof that we were still capable of hunger. But hunger isn't a map, and it can't tell you where to go. I hope, I said, that the voices you're following know how to hold you when the lights are off. She flinched like I'd struck her. That's not fair. Neither is love, I said, and stepped into the hall. The door clicked behind me, a sound I felt in my bones. I walked down the stairs because the elevator felt too easy. Outside, the air was bright, ordinary. People carried groceries. Kids kicked a ball. A dog barked a pigeon. The world did what it always does. Kept going. I stood there with my bag and let the ache spread until it found its shape. I wasn't competing with a man. I was competing with an idea. You can't wrestle a ghost. You can only walk away from a haunted house. So I did. I didn't go far at first. A friend from work lent me his spare room, a space barely big enough for a bed and a desk. The mattress sagged, the walls were bare, and every sound from the street slipped through the thin glass. But for the first time in months, the silence was mine. No buzzing phone on the nightstand. No half-laughs at my expense echoing from the kitchen. Just quiet. The first night, I lay on that narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to process the weight of what had happened. My body still remembered hers, the warmth of her thighs, the scent of her hair, the way she used to roll over and cling to me in her sleep. I wanted her, even then, with a desperation that made me sick. But underneath the longing was something darker, sharper, relief. The air in our apartment had been suffocating, thick with unspoken judgments. Here, in this imperfect little room, I could breathe. She called once late that first night. The screen lit up with her name, and I stared at it until the call ended. I couldn't bring myself to answer, because I knew what would be, either guilt laced with excuses, or more the same soft accusations that I wasn't enough. I couldn't stomach either. The days blurred. I threw myself into work, stayed longer at the office, lifting weights at the company gym afterward until my muscles ached. The pain felt honest. At least, no voices, no comparisons, just the grind of my own body against its limits. But at night, the loneliness crept in. I'd scroll through photos on my phone. Her laughing in the sunlight, her lips pressed to my cheek, her hair messy in the mornings. I'd remember the heat of her body under mine, the way her breath hitched right before she came, the whispered, "Don't stop," that had once been music to me. Desire and grief tangled until I could barely tell one from the other. One evening, after a week apart, she showed up at the office. I saw her waiting near the elevators, hair perfect, dress hugging her curves. My chest tightened instantly. "Can we talk?" she asked. We went to a cafe across the street. She stirred her coffee endlessly, eyes flicking up to mine and down again. Finally, she said, It feels wrong without you. For a heartbeat, hope flared. But then she added, I just don't know if wrong means I miss you or if it means I'm scared of being alone. I leaned back, the words like stones in my gut. Do you want me? Or do you just not want to be empty? She didn't answer. I reached across the table, brushing her fingers. Sparks leapt undeniable. My body remembered her, craved her for a wild second. I imagined pulling her out cafe, taking her somewhere private, tearing away all the polite distance. We could still make each other burn. But then I caught the look in her eyes. Not fire, not devotion, uncertainty. I let her hand go. I can't compete with shadows anymore, Anna. The better men you imagine, the lives you think you deserve, they don't exist. And even if they did, I won't be measured against them forever. Her lips parted, but no words came. I stood, dropped some cash on the table, and left her there with her untouched coffee. The walk back to my borrowed room felt like marching away from a battlefield I'd fought on too long. That night, I packed my bag properly. Not just clothes this time, but my guitar, a few books, the things that made me feel like myself. As I zipped the bag, I realized the war was over. Not because I'd won, but because I'd stopped fighting. I sent her a single text before I shut off my phone. I love you, but I won't spend my life proving it against ghosts. The weight lifted the moment I hit send. It didn't erase the hurt, didn't silence the memories of her body tangled with mine, didn't stop the ache that spread to me like a bruise. But it freed me. I stepped outside into the night, cool air brushing my face. The city hummed with ordinary life. Cars rushing, strangers laughing, lights glowing in apartment windows. For the first time in months, I wasn't carrying the chorus of her friends' voices in my head. I was alone, heartbroken, yes, but free. And as I walked down the street with my bag over my shoulder, I realized that freedom, even wrapped in pain, was better than love that demanded I become someone else's echo. Time didn't heal, it simply stretched. Days blurred into weeks, weeks into months, and somewhere along the line, the sharp edge of grief dulled into a steady ache. I learned how to carry it like an old injury, something you forget about until the weather shifts and it throbs again. I kept a small rented room for a while, though eventually I found an apartment of my own. It was plain, sparsely furnished, but every corner belonged to me. I hung nothing on the walls. I think I was afraid of permanence, afraid that if I decorated, it meant I was admitting this was my new life. Still, the silence felt different here. Not lonely, but clean. Work became my anchor. I pushed harder, earned the promotion my boss had hinted at. My suits fit better, my muscles firmer from the gym. People at the office noticed. Strangers did too. Some nights I caught women looking at me in ways that made me remember I was still desirable. I even went on a few dates. Dinner, drinks, polite laughter. They were nice enough, but every smile reminded me of Anna's smile. Every laugh was an echo of hers. I would walk home alone, oddly grateful that none of them asked for more. Anna reached out sometimes. A text here, a call there. Never anything grand, just small touches. Saw this and thought of you. Or, hope you're doing okay. I responded politely, never cold but never inviting. We danced around each other like ghosts afraid of colliding. Once, months after I'd left, she asked to meet. I agreed. We sat on a park bench, the autumn air sharp, leaves skittering across the pavement. She looked the same, beautiful, poised, but there was a shadow in her eyes I hadn't seen before. You look good, she said softly. Thanks. We talked about nothing, work, family, the weather. Finally, she took a deep breath. I thought leaving would feel like freedom, but it doesn't. It feels like noise that never stops. I studied her, searching for the woman I'd loved, the one I'd fought for. And what your friends say now? She laughed bitterly. They tell me I'll find someone better, that I should be patient, that I'm still young. Her eyes flicked to mine. But none of them are happy, not really. And sometimes I think I traded a home for an audience. Her words twisted something inside me. But I didn't reach for her. I couldn't. I'd walked too far down my own road to circle back. I'm sorry, she whispered. So am I said, and it was the truth. Sorry for what we lost. Sorry for what we became. Sorry that love alone wasn't enough. We parted with a hug that lingered just a second too long. I felt her body against mine, the old spark still flickering, and for a terrifying heartbeat I wanted to kiss her, to forget everything. But we didn't. We let go, and that was the final mercy. After that, the messages grew fewer, then stopped altogether. I don't know where she is now. Maybe with someone new. Maybe still chasing better. Sometimes I picture her alone in our old apartment, scrolling through her phone while the silence presses in. Other times I imagine her happy, really happy, with a man who fits the mold she carried in her head. As for me, I'm learning to live with both the ache and the relief. Some nights, I still dream of her, the curve of her hip under my hand, the way her breath quickened when I whispered her name. I wake hard, empty, reaching for someone who isn't there. But when the morning light comes, I make coffee in my own kitchen, in silence that belongs only to me. I've come to understand that love without loyalty is like building a house on sand. It feels solid until the tide comes in, and then you realize it was never yours to keep. I still believe in love. I still believe in sex that makes the world disappear, in laughter that fills a room, in two people choosing each other every day. I just don't believe anymore in begging someone to see me through the lens of their friends. Anna once told me I was safe. Maybe she was right, but safe doesn't mean weak. Safe means I can walk away when the person I love turns into a stranger. Safe means I can stand on my own, even with a heart cracked down the middle. So here I am, not broken, not whole, just a man who loved, lost, and finally let go. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough.